All right. Well, welcome everyone to the January 21st meeting of the Citizen Oversight Board. Happy to have you here. We have a great agenda today. We'll be joined by Chief Pazen in about 15 minutes to get an update on his work. In the meantime, I will kick us off with some board business and updates. First matter of business is approving the minutes from our previous meeting. Thank you, Daniel, for sending around an updated version of those. If folks have had a chance to review them and are comfortable with them, can I have a motion to approve them?
So moved.
Second.
Great. Perfect. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, the motion passes. Great. So a couple of board updates, which are noteworthy. We have gotten approval from a smaller committee of council to bring on a new board member. The final vote by council is February 1st, I believe. So in short order, we should have a new board member replacing Molly. Cannot be replaced, but assuming the seat that Molly has. That individual will join the first meeting will be February 17th or 18th, I think. So it's still a month out from our new member, but he had some vacation planned in between his board approval and our meeting. So exciting for him, and we're thrilled to get that individual on board. I had a meeting with him this week, and I think he'll have a lot to offer. So,
Can you give a little background, Julia? Julia, can you give a little background on him, or do you feel comfortable doing that?
Yes. Yep. His name is Larry Martinez. He is the executive director of the Denver Inner City Parish, so sort of west side of town. Is really excited about engaging the community in this work, and so I know something that the board has expressed interest on, and I think his skill sets can be a great fit for that. Based on his work, this feels like a really good fit for him, you know, personally, and in terms of his investment, and his organization is aware of his you know, role on the board and has allocated time for him, so he seems to have a lot of good support there as well. And he is in council member Torres's district, so that'll be a nice add to our geographic diversity, I think.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, with regard to the monitor hiring, all of you are aware, but the public may not be aware, that the selection committee made a recommendation to the board for 3 candidates to move forward. Those candidates will be interviewed by the board next week, and then the board will determine if we want to move all 3 or a select number into the public engagement round of this process. We also had some good meetings with community organizations about what those should look like the past couple of weeks, and we're sort of anchoring on the following. So there will be events the evenings of February 16th and 17th, and likely something during the day on the 17th. We also have a board meeting on the 18th, and so could include some engagement with candidates on that day. And then we'll also develop sort of a canned video. Each candidate will receive questions. They'll record themselves doing questions. We'll mush all those recordings together and post that to the COB website along with the feedback form. So if you can't make any of the other sessions, you'll at least have the opportunity to see the candidates in action for a few days. And that'll allow us, you know, a bunch of different ways for people to experience those individuals. We are going to take kind of a co-hosting approach for those community engagement sessions. So working on a letter to a number of community organizations to kind of sign on to different sessions and help bring community members and their constituencies to those events and make sure that we've got a broad reach and good participation. The idea being, none of these events is exclusive, and if you want to co-host all of them, that's great. But if you want to, sort of target one with your energies, that's how we'll do it. So we're currently looking for spaces because of coronavirus. The typical city spaces are not as easily accessible as we thought they would be. And so that may be something we leverage the community organizations for as well, if they've got possible spaces. Send a note to the board on that. And so if you can hold the evenings, like 5:30 to 7 kind of time frame, 16th and 17th, that would be great. Go ahead, Molly.
I was just going to say, I can check with the theater here because, we have big wide open space. It just depends how many people you think would attend.
I have no idea, but a space is better than no space. And so, yeah, if you could check, that would be awesome.
Okay. The only thing that could be a bump is that we require full vaccination to enter the building. So that might be something we have to think about with community members.
I think we'll have various options. So if we have one that you have to be, required to attend, we could have another one that you don't, or, there's always this online option that should be available. So we can respect the rules of the place that's hosting for sure. Okay, that's great. Thank you. And Danielle, perhaps you can follow up with Molly on that. Thank you for that offer. Any questions, comments, thoughts on the monitor hiring or community engagement approach? Okay, moving on. Daniel, I will turn it over to you for discussion on the progress for the annual report.
Thank you. So, as I had mentioned at the last meeting, I've split up the annual report into 3 buckets, 3 sections, perhaps is a better, slightly more professional term. And so the first section consists of the lists of board activities, as well as the lists of notable concerns from the community during 21-21. And I've also lumped into that some of the other miscellaneous things like the board member bios, the letter from the chair, and some of the sort of other category of things. I'm very close to having a first draft of that done. Just have a couple of one small section to finish up, and then I'll have the first draft of section 1 completed for review. Hoping to, April isn't here, but I was going to ask her as vice chair to give that a look over. She had also expressed an interest in helping with that section after the last meeting. So hopefully she'll be able to do an early review and make sure that that's on the right track. Bucket 2 is the OIM evaluation section. And so I have received preliminary data, performance data from the OIM, 2 standard tables that we've used in years past. The next steps I'd like to work on is getting the staff survey to OIM staff so they can fill that out, as well as working on the questions for safety leadership and getting their input. So need to get confirmation whether or not we want to change any existing questions or add any new questions for OIM staff. And the same goes for public safety leadership. So that would be the sheriff, the police chief, and the executive director of public safety. And then also looking for board input on whether or not we just send a questionnaire or a survey to public safety leadership, or whether we do an interview. I think both have been done in the past, but I'm not entirely sure. And then, subsequently, if it's going to be an interview, is that something that the board would like me to do, or is that something that board members should be sitting down with the public safety leadership to interview them? So I can pause right there and we can talk through those three questions, about questions for staff, questions for leadership, and whether we do a questionnaire or an interview for leadership. Does anybody have any strong
Nikki,
feelings
I
about that?
know, yeah, I was going to ask Nikki, I know you've done a lot of leadership on this in the past. Do you have thoughts on sort of what's worked and what hasn't?
I don't know that my thoughts are going to be really helpful in this circumstance. I have not been deeply involved in that section, and I've had mixed feelings for a number of years about that entire section. And I think I brought this up maybe a year and a half ago. I think we'll get to it when we do our retreat, but I'm not sure the way we have been assessing the monitor's office is exactly what's required in the ordinance. The way, I need to go back and look at the language, but the way I read it last time, I looked at it, I wanted us to be doing more of an assessment of the oversight system and the areas where it faced challenges, say, you know, we couldn't get access to evidence.com, the city attorney opinion. I know we can't share those, but stands in our way. Not so much a performance review of the monitor. And being that Greg is an interim monitor, you know, whose service I'm grateful for, I also think it's somewhat, I want to say irrelevant in this year, but, you know, it's a bridge year.
I would say, I mean, if there's some strong and some real performance indicators that we're going to would be bringing out and actually pointing to and speaking to specific performance indicators probably makes sense. But if it's kind of nebulous and we don't necessarily have anything strongly defined, I don't know that we'd be missing much. But that's kind of, I don't think it was in there the last year. Year before, and I think that was the big reason. I'm not against it. I just still not sure on how that looks.
Are you speaking, Al, about the public safety leadership?
Yeah.
Portion? Okay.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Katina.
I think the only thing I would add to the discussion is, first of all, I agree with Nikki to an extent. I think that the performance review isn't the whole story. And so there needs to be kind of an analysis or some review of the system as a whole to truly, I think the language in the ordinance is something like assess the effectiveness of the monitor. So what makes the monitor effective versus ineffective is much more than just how many cases did they monitor, right? Like it doesn't really get us there. So I agree with Nikki. I think that there's a benefit in sharing information about the work that the monitor's office has done, despite the fact that we currently have an interim monitor. If only to demonstrate that the office is still producing and producing quite well, right? Under very challenging circumstances. And I think that we could talk about, you know, what's the best way to demonstrate that or show that. We certainly are seeing it, you know, day in and day out. We get the emails and get the updates from Greg in executive session, et cetera. But the public, I think, probably needs some sense that, you know, yeah, the activities of the monitor's office continue to be quite effective, quite good, and in accordance with the ordinance in terms of the work that they're doing and the accomplishments that they have. Similarly, I think that feedback from the safety departments is also important. I don't necessarily think that the questionnaires that we have for the staff and the leadership are the best, but they're what we have for the moment. So, but I think we need to figure out a way to show, yeah, that this is a strong team, a strong group of folks that are doing really good work for the city on behalf of the community.
And just to chime in. I think there could also be a space for, you know, an analysis of problems and where things, you know, of the system as a whole in sort of the third section, which is to look at the Department of Safety side, Department of Public Safety side of things, and see, you know, where, I mean, it's sort of overlaps between, you know, access to evidence or full access to body cam footage that maybe hasn't already been flagged to be part of an investigation, things like that. I think we can make space for that, and other concerns in there if we'd like. That's sort of right now, section 3, the analysis of the Department of Public Safety and our recommendations is sort of the least well defined. And so I'm hoping next board meeting on the 4th to schedule some time to have a bit more of a discussion about what we want that section to look like, and what kinds of recommendations the board wants to be making for that section. So.
Okay, so that sounds like a good approach, is maybe taking that into that next opportunity for discussion, but really appreciate hearing board member feedback on that. Perhaps Danielle, because I know Chief Pazen has joined and wanting to keep us on time, could you, Danielle has planned to allocate time in each meeting until our report is due to discuss and engage on the report. And so he's got some milestones for that. If you can send that out in email, and then folks can provide feedback on at least this first discussion topic over email, perhaps that's our most efficient way. And then if you want to share the questions that we ask or have asked in the past again, perhaps we can get feedback, you know, direct edits on that, and move forward with that if there's a feeling that those questions aren't quite getting us to where we want to go. Nikki provided in the chat, in case folks didn't see it, what the ordinance says in terms of what we have to gather and report on. So give that a little noodle as well. Any other board business that you wanted to cover in your section, Daniel?
That's it.
Okay. Thanks for the feedback so far, members. Chief Pazen, I saw you join and then go away. Are you with us? Great.
Sure am.
Thank you. Happy New Year and welcome to our meeting. I know we sent you questions in advance, so would you like to address those to start, or with any other kind of opening commentary before we get into some dialogue?
Sure. Question number 1, how has the ongoing COVID surge affected current staffing at DPD and operations? We faced significant challenges, just like many other segments of our society. We had a huge spike about 2 weeks ago, was probably our peak, maybe 2.5 weeks ago was our peak, but just as swift as that peak went up, it's coming down. So we've been able to work our way through that challenge. It's by no means over, but we never had to kick in any of our pre-planned phases that we had developed, 2 years ago and modified over the years, or as we've learned more about COVID. So do we have enough COVID tests? Today we do, just like the rest of the country. When we needed them, we didn't have them. So now that we're on the backside of the spike, we received, the safety department received thousands of tests, I don't know, a week ago or so, kind of more on the backside. So question number 2, we were talking about the STAR program. 2.4% of DPD's calls for service And then you're referencing a report from Emily LaPelle on this. I stand by exactly what I said, and I know it to be true. As really the lead architect of bringing the STAR program to Denver in the first place, I want as many calls being handled by the most appropriate response out there. I want the best outcomes for individuals in crisis, and you know, we've been interviewed nationally, internationally about the STAR program, about co-responders, about outreach case coordinators. We have the most robust continuum of care system anywhere in the country, hands down, head and shoulders above anywhere else. So we've led in this space. We haven't been drug along kicking and screaming. So I know this to be true because that's how we were very intentional about the 2.5 years of building STAR before it even launched. And we calculated based on decision trees, off the entire 78 neighborhoods, which calls could be STAR eligible if we had the unlimited resource and we had STAR vans 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And so that's why I'm very confident in the 2.4. When you make, when folks
Chief
take
Pazen, sorry to interrupt you, just could you read the question, like, so that we can know what exactly, and the community can know what you're talking about?
So the question
Thank you.
is, Chief Pazen told the board that the STAR program was able to respond to 2.4% of DPD's service calls. And an external report looking at 9 different jurisdictions found that their estimate or their analysis showed only 1.3% of the calls for service. So a research article that I quoted did a independent study of 9 different jurisdictions and said that a STAR type alternative response could handle about 1.3% of the calls for service. Then the question continues that in August of 2020, a legislative report from Emily LaPelle at the City Council, City Council staffer, not a City Council member, estimated that as many as 15% of calls for service in Denver could be diverted to the STAR program. And then there's an attachment of that report that Emily put together right here. That said, what do I think needs to be done to increase the diversion levels? So the report looks at 911 calls, right? And it just classifies calls based on call types. And, you know, we were very intentional for 2.5 years building the STAR program, having 911 supervisors, clinicians, law enforcement professionals, community members, people with lived experience, identifying exactly which calls were most appropriate for alternative response. We have been very clear that we want better outcomes for people in crisis, and that is why we have arguably, and I think it would be hard to dispute, the most robust continuum of care with 32 co-responders, STAR program, outreach case coordinators to help us make sure that if a person is in crisis and they are not armed with a weapon, they're not displaying violent behavior, that a STAR van would respond to that. If it's a higher level of crisis, a higher level of potential violence, then a co-responder handles with a police officer, handles that type of call for service. And what I am telling you is that we identified all of these calls for service in evaluating what a STAR expansion would look like. And even though the pilot area is where the STAR van responded, we captured any potential calls that a STAR van could handle in any one of Denver's 78 neighborhoods, regardless of the pilot area. And I'm very confident in 2.4 being high end of STAR's availability to respond to those types of calls for service. What you see in the additional report about 15%, that is just looking at call types. Trespass, for example, right? If you just say that trespass calls could be handled by a alternative response, some trespass calls could, and some should not be handled by unarmed civilian members. So for example, we had a trespass call at 6th and Federal. This individual stabbed one of our officers, and we're fortunate that the officer is still with us today. A few months after that, we had a trespass call in the area of 40th and Alcott. In that situation, the individual was just on somebody's porch, pulled out a shotgun, and severely injured one of our officers. So you cannot just blanketly say this call type equals this type of response. You have to look at the types of calls for service and narrow down what is appropriate for a co-responder type call for service, what is appropriate for a alternative response STAR program type of response, and which calls for service are most appropriately handled by trained law enforcement professionals. So I hope that that answers the question. I'm sure there's plenty of folks a couple more here. So 2 point, the STAR program is expanding. I couldn't be more proud of the city's efforts with the STAR program. I cannot be more proud of our efforts to lead this. This wasn't, again, something that folks told us, hey, you should look at this, and reluctantly we got it going. It was the exact opposite years before people were talking about alternative response. Now, in the same vein, right, we talk about fully built out STAR program could handle somewhere around 2.4% of the calls for service. Our calls for service increased, total calls for service, not STAR van calls for service, not specific to alternative response. Our calls for service increased by 6.2%, 18,000 more calls for service, not 2021 versus a partial shutdown year of 2020, but 2021 versus a 3-year baseline. So we have fewer officers today to handle more calls for service, and these are police calls for service. The reason why we've been so supportive, the reason why we have led in this space is we want the better outcomes for the individuals in crisis. STAR vans are an and, they're not an or. And too many folks see this as the defund the police mechanism, and it's not. And all the STAR vans in the world are not going to reduce the shootings, the robberies, the auto thefts, the burglaries, the homicides that we have. It is an and. It is all about getting better outcomes for the individuals in crisis and preventing tragedies from happening. And we have a lot of experience doing this as a city, and it's something that the city should be very proud of, that we are focusing on getting better outcomes for people in crisis. And we've developed a mechanism that it's not just that call for service where maybe Paul is in crisis, whether Paul's armed with a weapon or not, right? Whether a co-responder de-escalates that situation or a STAR van de-escalates that situation. But then we do that warm handoff to case managers. So that way we try to prevent those future crises from happening. We'll continue to try to evolve this, but it needs to be very focused that this is about better outcomes for people in crisis, preventing tragedies that have happened far too often across our country. But this is not a mechanism to replace the police by any means. And you have to look at the data, you have to look at the call types, you have to really see the difference in there. Just categorizing trespass, for example, those are not calls that you can just blanketly say, well, STAR handles all these. Julia?
Yeah, so it's sort of a math question at the end of the day. So am I to understand that this 2.4 number is really, of the types of calls you respond to, 2.4 is the kind of calls that STAR program would respond to? Is that right? And so so the capacity constraint is not that we don't have enough teams or we don't direct the calls correctly. It's like there's only so many calls that we think this team would be addressing.
Julie, thank you. You put it into words that I probably should have used, because you're exactly right on
Okay.
this. It's not police department trying to hold on to calls, right? And proof positive by that is a third of the calls for service that STAR handles, that's generated by a police officer, right? If a police officer is engaging with an individual and realizing that STAR may be the most appropriate response, a third of all of STAR's calls for service, it's actually a police officer saying, hey, can you get the STAR van to stop up over here? So this is a true partnership and collaboration focused on better outcomes for individuals in crisis, and it's working. But you said it perfectly, Julia. It's not capacity or having, if we had all the STAR vans in the world, it's not that could then take more than that 2.4%. And then there's that, again, independent study, and they're saying it's about 1.3, and they looked at 9 different cities across the country. So hopefully that answered the question.
Okay.
Really, I think you clarified.
Yeah, just one more math question. So 2.4 is our max number of responses. So I forget how many calls you get in a year, but let's just say it's 100,000 calls a year. And so, we'd get 2.4% of those 100,000. And then the number that you're getting right now in the city is closer to 1.3, 1.4. Is that right? Or you're already at the 2.4?
So, the pilot program was designed where the most calls for service were happening in the geographical area that was most impacted, right? So imagine the downtown Denver core, for example, Center City, and then South Broadway. So it almost looks like a lollipop. I mean, we've referred to it, just when you look at it, you see downtown Denver, and then certainly we have some very appropriate responses that a high number of those calls for service are along the Broadway corridor. So we are actually capturing a lot of the calls for service because that's where they're happening. That's where the alternative response is most effective. Again, we want this available to help any part. So if a different neighborhood in Denver has not the same number of frequency types of calls, that's okay. We still want this tool available to be able to expand and go to those other areas. And that's what City Council and the mayor and DDPHE and Denver 911 and the safety department work together for this expansion, and we'll continue to do that. So similarly, the co-responder program, right? We started our co-responder program in 2016, right? The first conversations about it were like 2014, right? How do we do things better? How do we get better outcomes for people in crisis? That's been the North Star driving a lot of these types of approaches. This was very early on, very early adopted. Started with 4, we're now up to 32. We're right at, I think we're at the appropriate number, just because we're able to provide the coverage 7 days a week, 24 hours a day, and get that help where it's most needed. And it's been the same for STAR, using data to say how many calls, where they're occurring, time of day, how do you match this resource so it's most effective. And that's what has been driving the response to this, focusing on those outcomes, preventing tragedies. But it is it is not a replace the police as much as some folks want it to be. It is not a replace the police. It's an and, not an or. And really, if you're thinking about things in terms of increases in shootings, homicides, robberies, burglaries, auto thefts, these are things that are not, if you had a Venn diagram, they're not overlapping in these increases in crimes that we're seeing and the types of calls that a STAR program could respond to. Are we good there with question number 2? And Katina, you're right. I'll read the questions. I just, since we got them from you, I made the wrong assumption. Good on question number 2?
Thank you.
Question number 3, again, during our last meeting, there was some discussion around mutual aid agreements that DPD has with neighboring law enforcement agencies. Will DPD make copies of any current mutual aid agreements available to the board? Let me dig into that one. I'm so sorry that I didn't. I pulled the research on question number 2. Let me find out legally where we are on that. Again, there were recommendations that were made by the OIM's report, which, wow, it's more than a year ago, and we complied with those recommendations. So I promise to follow up on that, and I apologize that I didn't touch base with any of the legal folks on what that looks like.
I think of note to the board is not just what agreements we have, but also what are the enforcement mechanisms, or punitive is the wrong word, but like what happens if they don't do what the agreement says, right? They show up guns ablazing to a thing that we say, no guns ablazing. So we kind of want to understand like what happens if what's agreed to isn't what happens.
Well, a lot of this has been codified, with 217, the injunction, Judge Jackson's decisions. All of it, we have to abide by that, and it's very clear. And all of those requirements are communicated on, prior to any type of request, and then at any briefing with this. It is required, like a required checklist that takes place before any and all briefings where there would be any sense or any sort of mutual aid. But it's codified across the state with some of the 217 rules there. So. Stefan?
Chief, thanks. Are you saying that you're not sure if the mutual aid agreements are public? I just was curious if you thought if they're public or not. Maybe that's more of a legal question for the city attorney's office. I don't know. I just assumed they were public, which is, that was my question actually. I'll cop to it. I just assumed they were.
Let me find out. Yeah. And again, this is truly me not digging in on question number 3. So
that's perfect. That's fine. That's fine.
Okay. Question number 4, January 3rd, City Council voted to approve DPD's request for a 5-year contract with ShotSpotter. Can you please describe what kind of data related to ShotSpotter is tracked and how much of it, if any, is made public? Where can that be accessed? How many ShotSpotter alerts are verified by DPD as false positives? How many are unverifiable? So, and I think it was covered quite well with the City Council presentation. I'm hopeful that folks got to see this. ShotSpotter, let me put this out there. ShotSpotter is a gunfire detection system. It is not a gunfire prevention system or a gunfire intervention system. It is a gunfire detection system. And far too often, before ShotSpotter, folks would hear gunfire. You can't pinpoint it once you're inside your house. And oftentimes those gunshot calls, folks wouldn't even call 911 on. And a huge percentage of calls related to gunfire never occurred because people sometimes assume that other folks would make that call, or that, well, it's not my business and I'm not going to make it my business type of deal. So this system, this gunshot detection system was utilized, and we used data, and the data was based on where the shootings were occurring. So this data is pretty good data, right? We know where individuals are victims of shootings because there is a report made in those situations. A victim of an ag assault firearm, which is a gunshot, victims of homicide, and that data was utilized in order to place the gunshot detection systems in this. Now, when it comes to how we verify that they have their 90% accuracy, is we follow up on these calls for service. So if, for example, a call at a specific location or an intersection took place, then officers would respond. The contract requires that they are within 90% accuracy of this, 5 meters from where they pinpoint this. Officers respond to those areas and try to help folks. If somebody injured as a result of this call, has somebody been struck by this gunfire, and in many cases we have been able to provide aid and in some circumstances save lives as a result of this. So we get some calls for service. Let's just hypothetically pick an intersection. Officers are dispatched. Let's say it's 3 o'clock in the morning. We go there. First is life safety. We don't see any victims of crime. We search the area. If there's any obvious damage as a result of this, we check the area to see if we can recover those shell casings. So many times we can, because of this pinpoint 5 meter accuracy area. We recover that evidence, and it is then used in those NIBIN analysis. Is this a gun that it was used in multiple shootings? Is somebody injured as a result of previous shootings? Things of that nature. Now let's say that same situation, 3 o'clock in the morning, we don't find any shell casings. Well, sometimes it's because it's dark out, right? It's difficult to see some very small objects when it's dark out. So then we follow up the next day and we send officers out to check the area when there's light or there's better conditions to do this. So we're very confident based on how we follow up with the vendor in this particular case that they are meeting that threshold, and we hold them accountable to ensure that they are. If there can be disruptions in the sensors based on building, new buildings, for example, that would block the ability to triangulate what this looked like. So the long and short of it is our work following up on this gives us great confidence that they are meeting or exceeding that threshold, that it is a valuable tool in saving lives in some circumstances, rendering aid to individuals who've been struck, who otherwise there was not a corresponding 911 call, in recovering evidence, in building strong prosecutable cases for individuals who are firing guns inside our city. As we know, there's dramatic increases in shootings, in homicides, and robberies. So there's gun crimes that we are working hard to address, and this tool provides effective evidence in doing that. Good on question 4.
Do board members have questions on that? Okay, let's move on.
Question 5. So Actually, I like that you put weighs heavily on our community. So because this weighs heavy on me personally, as it does several of our workforce who have on their personal lives been impacted by the horrible tragedy that occurred on December 27th. So the question is, the December 27th Lakewood, Denver shooting spree weighs heavy on our community members' minds. Is there anything you would like to share with the board about how DPD is following up on that event? This is hurt so many families, so many friends. It has had such a negative impact on our community. And I have to choose my words carefully here because there is a review currently taking place to take a look at this, right? Hindsight is often 20/20 and what you know beforehand compared to what you know after. But I also want to point out, and particularly to this board that really focuses on police operations, that as we stated in our statement, you have to have a legal basis to conduct an investigation, right? So I'm going to try to hit period there. Folks do not want police officers conducting investigations if there is not a legal basis to do that. So we just hit period right there for a second. I may have even said a couple of words too many. And then secondly, we released a statement on red flag, right? I'm just going to try to mirror that, right? If it meets the criteria, we file it. And I think, so let me hit period right there. If it meets the criteria, we file it. And let me go back historically. I would encourage folks to take a look. Denver has a track record of when it applies, we utilize it. And we certainly, are hurt by this, definitely not to the level that our victims, our families that have been impacted, but this one's tough. It's really tough, and there'll be there's an ongoing review now, and to make sure, but there has to be a legal basis for an investigation. You have to have a nexus to your city, to your jurisdiction, and that is important, right? People do not want law enforcement to conduct investigations that they don't have jurisdiction over, that they don't have a legal authority to do. So hitting period there. I'm so sorry to seem like we have to allow the review to take place, and I'm just going to hit pause, and I may not be able to answer everybody's questions as a result of this, but I'll try.
Chief Pazen.
Hi, Molly.
Hi.
Long time no see.
Yeah, so I have some questions about this, but not related to the red flag part, more about the encryption of like radio communication between officers, just considering that this occurred over multiple locations. And I wonder if that makes you rethink that policy when it could have potentially kept people safe knowing where this guy was going.
Again, we're doing a review. We'll take a look at everything. On its surface, I do not believe that encryption or non-encryption would have had any impact whatsoever on situations like this. So that's it. Sorry.
Stefan, did you have a question?
Yeah, I mean, Chief, I think we fully expected that there were, in light of the fact that this is an ongoing investigation and people are looking at that, you wouldn't be able to share a lot publicly. I think speaking for myself and probably a lot of people on the board, this was just such a tragic event. And, so rather shocking and affected many communities, including ours, that we just felt it incumbent on us to ask you, what kind of updates that you could provide to us, in light of what happened. So again, just speaking from my perspective, and anything you can share, we want the public to be aware of that.
Well, and I think we stood up and we said that there were two previous incidences that that law enforcement were made aware of in this. We have every FOIA request, we have shared every document that's related or core request. We've shared every document that we can. I think, Stefan, I think you know this very well on a legal basis for an investigation, right? And I know those are vague terms, but you have to have that criminal nexus to conduct an investigation, and that part. I'm just going to hit pause. This has devastated, the victims, their families, their friends. It's devastated our community, and including very close personal relationships that people in this workforce have with victims of this particular incident. It was also, we had two Denver police officers who bravely engaged this suspect and exchanged fire with this individual. That investigation is part of this. They put themselves in harm's way to try to stop this as quickly as possible. In that situation, it continued. I'm exceptionally proud of the Lakewood agent that placed himself in harm's way and stopped this. But we have to conduct investigations that we have a legal basis to do so, and we have to follow the laws. We have to follow the rules. There's a reason for those, and a review will take a look at did the officers follow the rules and the laws on this. I think the statement was very clear on the criminal nexus. I think the statement pointed to the fact that a legal basis, and I'm going to have to just hit stop right there because where we are with this, there's a deep dive that's being done. There's two officer involved shootings, the Denver officer involved shooting, the Lakewood officer involved shooting that must continue in these cases as well. Those are aspects of this, and I need to just hit the stop button here. So Julia.
Yeah, I guess my question is kind of zoomed out from this. I don't know if this has been classified as a hate crime, but I know the individual had a lot of hateful writings. And I know, based on good reporting from Southern Poverty Law Center, general awareness that hate crimes are going up. And, I suspect that this individual is probably not the only one who's in your database with, suspicious and hateful writing that, could eventually lead to crime. And I just wonder sort of, how has your thinking evolved on this topic based on, the level of activity? And, we had a synagogue taken hostage a few days ago. I had a colleague from an old job who was pushed onto the subway for being Asian in New York City, right? Like, this is happening every day in America. And I just wonder, what are we thinking about from a policing standpoint about this topic?
Okay. A couple of things, right? And then I just want to put a little clarification on a database, right? So 28 CFR 23, there has to be a criminal nexus for you to do an investigation, right? So if you don't have that criminal nexus, you have to purge these types of files. So I just want to make sure we adhere to the laws around ensuring that investigations have the legal basis. And if they don't, then you don't get to just collect files. You don't get to just download information and there's a reason we in this country have these types of laws, and rightfully so. So I just sort of want to clear that part up. Now, everything else, yes, we have to be focused on hate crimes. And if somebody commits a crime, we certainly share that information, or we investigate that and share that with the district attorney. This district attorney and our team are never shy about adding the hate crime to the offense. Or adding the hate crime as a charge, right? If it applies, then we utilize this tool in partnership with the Denver District Attorney's Office. And we have created a bias-motivated unit. Instead of crimes being a collateral, hate crimes being a collateral duty of like a general assignment assault or domestic violence unit, we have very specifically created a bias motivated unit. They've gotten additional training. That way they can look for any time that a bias motivated incident applies, and then they share that in conjunction with the district attorney. And we are not shy about it. If a hate crime is applicable, then we certainly work to gather that evidence so we can prove that motivation, that intent, and we share that with the DA in an effort to hold that person accountable, so that way we can have fewer hate crimes in the future. So I'm proud, again, this was something that our team developed. Our bias motivated unit isn't a 5, 10, 20-year-old program. This is relatively, it's something that we have done, so that way we can address this. And then on a sidebar, what we do with bias motivated crimes is, yes, it impacts that victim, right? Whether it's a person crime or a property crime, it impacts that person, but it also impacts the community. So let's say there's a hate crime directed towards a house of worship, for example. Not only do we have our bias motivated team, the investigation side, trying to get to the motivation, pull as much evidence as possible, but then we also have our outreach team that goes to try to help the community as a whole, connect them to resources, right? Let's say a house of worship is a block away from my home. Well, yes, that's the victim, is that church, synagogue, or mosque. But there's fear, for myself, for my family members. And so we proactively go out with a mental health clinician, with resources that I can get, that I can follow up to try to help me with dealing with this increased fear of crime, this increased fear of hate, or hate that has come to my neighborhood. How can we address this? And so that's part of how serious we take bias motivated crimes. And we work hard not only to investigate them, but we also work to try to support the community that is impacted. And sometimes you have situations that impact our entire metro area, right? And that's something that we need to make sure that these cases are handled appropriately.
Thanks. Any other board member questions on this topic? Okay. you want to keep going on the questions, I can't remember how many we have. Is that it?
That's it. That's the last question. I'm sorry.
Well, great. Sorry about that.
Yeah.
Awkward silence. Okay. Other board member questions for Chief Pazen?
I had a couple of questions. Let's see, Chief Pazen, at some point, you mentioned today that there are fewer officers to answer more calls. Is that like as of today, present day, your staffing is down? By how much?
Our staffing, our effective strength is down somewhere between 160 and 180 officers.
Mhm.
That's a lot. We have about 9-10% decrease in workforce. At the same time, we have a 6.2% increase in workload, and that's significant.
What about your academy? Are you getting folks signing up to? So I mean, are you working to recruit new people to get them in? How's that looking?
Well, I appreciate the question. I want to be very thankful to the mayor and city council for helping us at least create budget to bring on new academy classes, which is good news. The bad news is it's very difficult to try to fill academy classes. So we're hovering about 50% of capacity in filling those academy classes, and that just exacerbates the challenge. At the same time, we had over 100 officers that left in 2021. So not only do we have more work and fewer officers, but we have more officers that need the profession and fewer officers coming in. So
your academy classes they're not full?
no,
They're not, they're half as full.
Our October class was scheduled for 40 and we have 19. And our December class was scheduled for 52 and I believe the number's 30.
And you're saying like years ago, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, it was actually at 40 and 30?
We had no trouble filling academy classes in the past.
Okay. Let's see. The other question I had is I've had a couple of folks reach out to me because they felt like they weren't able to get the police to investigate a crime against them. And I guess I just want to know, has there been any sort of shift in your protocol or your approach to how you respond to calls for service, given the staffing change? I get that's the only thing I could think of, but I'm just asking. Has there been?
Absolutely not. We respond to 911 calls, and the response times have increased. They've increased dramatically as a result of staffing challenges that we face, and that's an issue. So the highest priority calls, the 0s, 1s, and 2s, we're seeing a significant increase in the amount of time it takes to respond to those calls for service, right? It is supply and demand, more volume, more calls for service, fewer officers to respond to these types of calls. We have taken some innovative, proactive strategies to address it, including if it's a property crime or report call, then utilizing a remote opportunity to handle that call to lighten the load for the officers out on the street and free them up to address these higher priority calls. But it's a volume issue, more calls for service, fewer officers to handle it. But if you dial 911, it is a police emergency. Officers will respond to that call and address it. Now, if there is a crime that occurred, then we investigate that crime. It will be forwarded to an investigator just as it any and all crimes have in the past, and that continues. There's no change in protocol. It's not there's no lack of investigations on calls or on cases. So if you have some incidences that you would like me to look into, please, you can do that offline, and we can take a look at it. But if
Okay.
there's a crime in Denver, then we work to address it.
Sure, I will. I'll follow up with you on that. Although I guess I'm just asking, for the benefit of the larger group, if you wouldn't mind sending us over the data around that's showing this, expansion in time, that would be really helpful. I think, could you clarify what you mean by remote opportunity to address call? What does that look like?
So if there's a property crime, the suspect is no longer on scene, the documentation is primarily for report purposes only, for insurance. Instead of dispatching an officer to that call, then we are utilizing injured officers, for example, to follow up with that person, make sure that that incident is documented in a police report and taken care of. If there's any type of physical evidence, then that call would be handled by a uniformed police officer or any suspect on scene. So some of these lower priority calls where suspect is no longer on scene, there's no physical evidence in the particular case, then we document that in a crime report. That information is obviously given to the individual who was impacted, but it frees up officers to focus on this increased workload.
Right, and that's done what, via telephone?
Telephone and computer, yes.
Okay.
Other questions for Chief Pazen? All right, well, thank you so much for your time today. We appreciate your responses to our questions and look forward to seeing you again soon. We'll let you go.
Thank you, Chief.
Bye all. Nice to see you. Take care.
Interim Monitor Crittenden, anything you'd like to share in the public meeting?
We don't have anything for the public meeting.
Okay. All right, with that, I will adjourn us and enter into executive session for purposes of discussing a few things, and see you over there.